So I'm going to go through just the first few slides of this really quickly, and then we'll hand over to Sandra to have a bit of a chat through a bit more of the information. Okay, 2022 Marshall Cycle. And so general pitch in terms of the Marshall Scholarships and why for students would be great to apply for the Marshall Scholarships. Well, firstly, we have 4 of the top 10 universities located in Britain, top 10 universities in the world located in Britain. But I think that's only just part of the picture in terms of what happens. And I think one of the great challenges, as I'm sure you'll hear from Sandra and Diane, is look, we're not just looking for students going to those 4 out of the top 10 universities, the ones in the UK, Britain. What we love is seeing candidates who come forward and they're like, I want to study this degree at this university, and it's the best in the world for doing this. And I'll talk about one instance of that, who won a Marshall Scholarship a couple of years ago. The concept that the UK has a lot of its strength of knowledge in universities all over the place in terms of what it's doing. And I think there's a lot of greatness that can come from that. So yeah, there's a lot of cutting edge, great universities that happen, a lot of one-year programs and shorter degree programs in terms of what's actually going on. Looking at who our Marshall Scholars are, like there's a range of pictures we've got here of soldiers, advocates, innovators, community leaders, musicians and authors. But in reality, amazingly, these people aren't as much from the New York patch, so I don't know them as well in terms of this. But I mean, the short in which I would say is that the Marshall Scholarship Program is amazingly diverse. Benjamin can definitely, to his own experience, speak to part of that. But just as part of that, I've just made a quick list before I go on here. We've got 2 Supreme Court justices currently. The person who I was mentioning just previously, Claire Garfield, SUNY Stony Brook, shout out to Stony Brook if they're on the line at the moment, is up in the northern parts of Scotland at the moment where she can go into her lab successfully. She's studying right on the edge of Scotland at the University of Highlands and Islands, doing a study on algae. Amazing candidate, very glad to have her as a Marshall Scholar. Reid Hoffman, the inventor of LinkedIn. Faiza Massoud, shout out to CUNY Hunter if they're on the line, studying Islamic law. And the last example, considering that I was just talking to NYU, Essence Lotus just came through this year studying applied theatre. Range of very interesting, diverse scholars, been really great to have them as part of the process. And the Marshall Scholarship community is a very diverse community in terms of the work. The only thing I'd like to say here is the sense of, in terms of the Marshall Scholarship, we do not practice positive discrimination in any which way in terms of what we're doing, but what we want to do, and what I consider as very much my role and Rachel's role, is we want to get the great diverse group of candidates forward to the Marshall Committee, set the selection and different levels and the readers, so that they can try and pick out a wonderful bunch of Marshall Scholars that reflects all of the United States of America. So that's my interesting little bit at the start. But in terms of the conversation getting a bit more media, I'd like to hand over to Sandra Pinavayo, who is the chair of the reading committee, and she can talk a bit further in terms of the aspects of the Marshall Scholarship Program. Sandra?
Hi, everybody. I thought I'd quickly introduce myself before digging in. I was a 1985 Marshall Scholar out of Michigan State University. At Michigan State, I was a double major in biochemistry and political philosophy with a minor in classical piano. And I applied for the Marshall and for the Rhodes and for the Truman when I was a little younger. And, you know, winning a Marshall Scholarship literally changed my life. I went from East Lansing, Michigan, in a small town where I had grown up there, to Trinity College, Cambridge, where I read biochemistry under a program that I think is no longer supported by the Marshall Scholarship, in that I read part 2 or the last year of the undergraduate program in biochemistry, and then did a 1-year MPhil in biochemistry. My career, my argument to the scholarship committee in 1984 was that I was going to combine humanities and science in a career that was related to the advancement of science and its impact in the world. It turns out that I grew up to become a problem solver of a different sort. My career has been largely as a management consultant and largely intercontinental, connecting the US and the UK in business settings. So my career began at McKinsey, and I, in the last 15 years, have launched and led a rapidly growing professional services firm called Business Talent Group. It is my pleasure to be serving in this role, and I'm going to take just a few slides right now to talk a little bit about the selection and a little bit more about the scholarship program, but I look forward to the Q&A. And the other thing I would say at this point is there's no way I would win a Marshall Scholarship today. The program continues to just attract extraordinarily talented young people and with visions that are much more developed and much more baked about how they're going to have impact in the world than was possible for me to have at that age in 1984. Okay, I think you all know this, that the Marshall Scholarship Program is funded by the British government. It's an act of parliament that happens every year, still established in 1953, to basically thank the United States for its aid in the Marshall Plan. I have to tell you that for myself personally, this was a enormous responsibility. I felt so grateful, but also just like the impact of carrying forward under George Marshall's name and sort of receiving the gratitude of a nation for, you know, a world war. So it was a very profound thing to me. It's not just winning a golden ticket. It felt like an obligation and a duty. You know, I think the reputation of the scholarship program remains that it's a highly prestigious academic award, opening wildly new doors for the recipients of it. And I also would just say that it's changed my life, not only professionally, but personally. Many of my best friends continue to be Marshall Scholars. Could we go on to the next slide, please, Andrew? So, you know, the eligibility criteria are well spelled out in writing. They have to be smart, high-performing students. They have to be U.S. citizens. I think this is very, very clear. But I think what we want to talk about is what above and beyond these criteria of eligibility really makes someone stand out as a terrific candidate for a Marshall Scholarship, and how can they show the best they can possibly show in the application process. So I suspect people don't have questions about this. I'll come back to it if we need to, but let's go on to the next slide. So the application process has a choice that each individual scholar institution can make. They must apply in one of the regions that are shown on the slide here, but you can choose to apply based either upon where your institution, your undergraduate school, is located, or your permanent home address. So for me, it was really easy. I grew up in Michigan. I went to Michigan State. I applied in the Chicago region. But certainly in Northeast and Boston, we have an extraordinary percentage and number of students who either go to school there or live there or vice versa. So there's some selection considerations to be made into where a particular scholar should apply. The programs run in parallel, so you can only apply in one region, and those selection processes happen in parallel across the regions, but are, you know, very, very, very aligned and similar. Let's go to the next slide. So this so simplifies it. It's just amazing. When I look at this, I think, wow, it really is much harder than this little list makes it seem. But of course, there's an application that people have to fill out. The thinking part about what you want to do and why you want to go to that institution is really the students. So basic form and short answers, yes, absolutely. There's a classic set of essays that you have to write, transcripts to provide. Each of the universities or colleges need to endorse the candidate and do so with insight, with sincerity, and with, gravitas. And then the letters of recommendation support it. But of course, the work needs to kind of start around now. I remember, I'm interested about Benjamin and Audrey's point of view on this as well, but, you know, to really lining up your storyline and understanding the stepping stone that will be created by your time in the UK at one of these schools takes a lot of work. And of course, you're still very young, and of course, you're still taking classes, and you're still working on your senior thesis and all that kind of stuff. So getting started early on these seemingly simple components is something that any good scholar should be thinking about. Okay, next slide. We have a couple of special considerations that have been worked into the application because of COVID. This past year, they're not major components of the application, but we do ask the scholars to contribute, if they would like, a short statement on how the pandemic has affected them and their ability to pursue their lives and their studies. And we ask the university or college to clarify its policies on their scholarship and their extracurriculars during the pandemic. Next slide. Okay, I think this is where I turn it over to Diane. Is that right, Diane?
You can. I thought you were going to do the academic merit, but I can cover it if you'd like.
Oh, I'm happy to do the academic. Why don't you go ahead and take it from here? I've chatted for a while now. Let's hear another voice.
Okay. Sorry, let me get my video switched back on. So I'm Diane Flynn. I'm the chair of the New York Selection Committee. I've been working with the Marshall Scholarship Program for the past 16 years, 7 of which were in the UK with the Marshall Commission. And then I spent 2 years reading with the Boston Committee. And then for the last 7 years, I've been the chair of the New York Selection Committee, where Andrew said that I helped create these criteria as part of my work as a commissioner. We looked at how transparent we were with our application process. Did students understand how we were evaluating them? Did schools understand what we were looking for in candidates? And we tried very hard to put together a set of criteria that applied to a diverse range of applicants so that it wasn't targeted at people who want to be politicians or people who want to be scientists. Hopefully these criteria help you identify students who will be strong Marshall scholars, who will be innovative in their fields, regardless of what fields they are, who will help to make an impact in the world, again, regardless of the field that they're in. So the first set of criteria that I'm going to talk about are our academic criteria. We have academic leadership and ambassadorship, and we're looking for a good balance across all 3 sets of criteria. So if you're trying to assess candidates on your campuses, if they're strong academically but don't have great leadership qualifications, they're probably not a great Marshall candidate. We want to see them exhibiting some of these attributes in all 3 categories: academic, leadership, ambassadorship. So for the academic side of things, we're obviously looking for people who have a strong and relevant academic background in their field. We don't assess candidates by GPA, except for the fact that they need a 3.7 to be eligible to apply. We don't ever sit in a room and say, this candidate's got a 3.9, that one's only got a 3.75, therefore I'll take the candidate with the 3.9. We're really looking and reading their transcripts. We're making sure that they've done the coursework they need to be qualified to do the graduate programs that they want to undertake. We're looking at the sorts of research or extra work on top of their coursework that they might be doing. Have they published anything? Have they started to make an impact in networks in their field? Are they delivering any sort of value within their field outside of their coursework? So this is where we talk about strong and relevant academic background. It's not just the GPA, it's a variety of things that make up, will this student be a strong and successful graduate school candidate? Will they potentially be a leader and thought leader in their field someday? Then we're looking at, as Sandra said earlier, how well have they chosen the program of study in the UK? Do they know the courses and the supervisors, especially if they're proposing a research degree? Have they reached out? Do they know, and have they made sure that the classes that they want to take will allow them to do the kind of research they want, that there's a proposed supervisor in place who will supervise that research? So we really are looking at, have they done their homework around what they've proposed? Then we're looking at, as well, around quality of the program of study. Have they picked the right school? Do they understand the value that studying in the UK will add? Quite often we'll see students who are proposing courses to us, and in an interview we're saying to them, well, why did you pick this school and not that school? Or why a school in the UK versus the US? Because programs in the US are stronger. Why is it that you want to do your graduate program here? And really make them justify that. So these are things that the students need to be thinking about. The last thing we're looking at is the quality and breadth of recommendations. So again, we're looking to see, do experts in this student's field think that they're going to be successful? Could these people see this student as a peer someday, or even surpassing them as a peer someday, hopefully? People ask us all the time, does it matter how senior the level of writer is? It depends. We're looking for people who will write really good letters, who understand the student and the student's potential across all 3 of our criteria. So it's one of those things where we're looking for the quality of the letter, not just how senior the letter writer is. If you've got a very senior letter writer only writing 1 paragraph, that's not useful to us. I'm going to move on to the leadership criteria now. Now, The one thing, I'm not going to go through these in the same bullets that I did with the academic, because we do this every year and we're still seeing some of the same issues with the leadership in the applications. The one point I'm going to address on this slide directly is the creativity. The people who put together these slides truncate this, and it's creativity in problem solving. We're not looking for piano playing scientists or opera singing politicians. We're looking for people who can spot an opportunity or spot a problem and think outside the box about how do I address this? How do I turn, this into a better position? Now, one of the reasons why I'm not going to talk through the criteria one by one in bullets is because I want to talk about some of the things. I was thinking about this and thinking, what are the examples that make people strong applicants as we're looking at people that we interview? What are the types of things they're doing to demonstrate their leadership? And so I grouped it into kind of 4 different categories. One was looking at they're influencers. They're maybe going on campus and influencing policies and practices on campus, or they're off campus and influencing local policies and practices. They're people who are looking at things and saying, how do I use what I know to sway somebody to make them do something a little bit differently? One of the examples that we spotted this year was somebody who, not holding a position in student government, just a student on campus saying, hey, my campus isn't doing anything about menstrual equity, and that's not right, and petitioned her campus leaders to put in place, free women's products on campus, and then actually put together a group of students to monitor that the bathrooms were actually being stocked properly. So this was somebody who just on their own, said, this isn't right, I can make a difference in this area, here's what I can do and how I can do it, and then went and did it. The next two are kind of linked. There's something about creating programs where there are gaps, and some of these will be people who are on campus and who create extracurricular activities, or it may be people who are off campus. They're creating nonprofits, or they're creating working groups with local libraries or with schools or with tutoring groups. And typically they're working across stakeholder groups. They're not just working with their peers. They're going, there's a gap here and I can fill it somehow, and I can do it in a way that's engaging lots of people who are different from me. So as I said, it may be starting a club, it may be starting a nonprofit, it may be just starting a small activity somewhere, but they're working on startups. So as I said, there's 2 different varieties of this. One is on campus, it's a little more peer related. One is off campus and it's looking at broader stakeholder groups. Could be the actual formation of a nonprofit. The 4th category of leadership that we often see is people who are in either a work experience or who are in an extracurricular experience, or who may even be in a campus job or a research lab on campus, but where they've challenged the status quo somehow and had some impact. They've said, you know what, I have a different idea than what we're currently working on, and I want to make this happen. And they've convinced the group of people that they're with to do it their way, and that it's had a positive impact. Or they've said, we could be working on this, but we don't. And here's why we should, and let's do it. And they've done it, and it's had a positive impact. Or they're engaging a new group of people. They're saying, we're working in this sphere, but we could be engaging these people and pulling them into our work. So in case that helps, this is the sort of thing we're looking at. You can see with the criteria, delivering results, creativity and problem solving, having the courage to step out of their comfort zone to do things in a new and different way, demonstrating their ability to lead and that they understand their impact on others, and that strength of purpose. It's always kind of driving forward. Do I know what I'm aiming for? Am I actually hitting it with the activities I'm putting in place? So this is what we're looking at with leadership and the things we're trying to assess. Obviously, the list I generated isn't all encompassing. Hopefully your students will do things that amaze and surprise us. So don't take this as gospel. It's not do these 4 things and you'll get a Marshall Scholarship. Do lots of exciting things and hopefully you'll get a Marshall Scholarship.
And Diane, you might want to, you might want to just comment on quality versus quantity in leadership, because one of the things I think we saw in the applications were, it's not about having page after page after page of clubs and committees and things that you've done and were part of. It's really the quality of the leadership moments that you choose to highlight in these in the application. I don't know, would you add on to that?
Well, I was going to add on to that as Benjamin was going to start to speak, because Benjamin is a fantastic example of this, where when you all get to meet Benjamin a bit later, he is one of the first groups of scholars that I selected as chair of the New York region. I've witnessed him go through the process and come out the other side. And when I say witness through the process, we get scholar reports from the scholars every year, and they come to the selection committees. So we can actually see did this scholar do what I thought he was going to do as an applicant, he or she do as an applicant? And Benjamin was one of these great candidates where he was deep in his topic. He is a subject matter expert on birds and bird migration. And what he showed was, though, breadth across leadership and ambassadorship. He was doing great work in engaging new audiences on his field. He was fundraising, he was doing research, he was publishing, he was doing all kinds of things that were linked to our leadership and our ambassadorship criteria, but without kind of going, oh, well, I'm a scientist and I like birds, but I'm going to go over here and do a political internship somewhere just for the heck of it. So, you know, you can have those people who are really deep in what they know and what they love, but you want to see that they can demonstrate breadth across having impact and being leaders and being able to engage others and be that ambassador in their field. Is that what you wanted to know, Sandra?
I think so, yeah. It's a focus and quality of leadership, whether it's demonstrated in taking one thing, you know, really far in terms of driving change and impact, or putting together a portfolio like Benjamin did that makes sense. But it's you know, trying to de-escalate the resume building sort of trends that we see in college applications, high school applications, where it's about being able to tick the boxes of how many different clubs and things that you've done on top of your studies.
Yeah.
So it has to have that central thesis of something mattered and I made a difference, and I was able to define and execute kind of change and results related to that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you. Can I move on to the ambassadorship now? Okay. Now, one of the things I love working with Sandra for is she makes me think about things in a different way. And again, when we talk about ambassadorial potential, we're still seeing issues with schools where they're thinking about ambassadorial potential with that capital A ambassadorship. And Sandra likes to talk about ambassadorship with the little a ambassadorship, which I'm loving this model of let's talk little a ambassadorship. And the three scholars that we've got with us today are scientists. They're not politicians. We did this on purpose because we want to show you that not everybody who becomes a Marshall Scholar is going to be a capital A ambassador. But we would like you to think about what capital A ambassadors do in their little a ambassadorial roles. They are building relationships. They're learning and teaching cultures. They're out there trying to solve problems over a long term. They're working with people across all different strata of life, different races, different socioeconomic boundaries, different fields. They're not waiting for things to come to them. They're going out and they're seizing those opportunities. So this is where we're looking for Marshall Scholars from all fields who can go out and do these things. We want them to be able to survive in the UK, you know, on their own. We don't want them to expect that everything is going to be handed to them on their campuses, that they're going to have activities handed to them, funding handed to them. We want people who are going to go out and make the most of this opportunity. We want them to have some sort of long-term connection to the UK in their field. This isn't the kind of thing where this is a gap year for study. I don't know what else to do. I'll go study in the UK. We want them to have a compelling pull to go to the UK and to really have a relationship with the UK over the long term of their career. So when we look at this ambassadorial potential, you know, the essay, we know the essay is hard. We've taken the Churchill out of it, you know, but we still want people to be talking to us about what's new and unusual in their field. Why do they need to be spending time in the UK? How will that play out over their long-term career? How will they engage with people outside of their schools who are different from them? How will they learn the culture? How will they teach the American culture? What are the sorts of things that they're doing? And we want to see evidence in their past history from their undergraduate years that they've been doing some of these things as undergraduates as well. Is there anything you'd like to add to that, Sandra?
You know, I think taking the pressure off the applicants to be able to say, I want to have a, you know, dual appointment on an international commission, blah, blah, blah. It's not about being that specific, but it really is, these people, even if they're introverts, and many, many, many really smart applicants are introverts, they have to have a passion for connecting with others on things that matter. Right. I mean, I think we don't want Marshall Scholars going over and sitting in their room or in their lab and not being connected, at least within their field, and experiencing a really deep immersion in study abroad. Right. I mean, it is study abroad with an obligation. As I said, when in the history of the scholarship, that really impressed me at the very beginning, really quite different from the Rhodes, where there's literally an obligation to be thoughtful about the fact that this is an international arrangement between two countries, the appreciation expressed from one to another, the fact that we were allies in a very tough time. This was something that was very, very prominent. And I remember when I first landed in Cambridge, it was Star Wars, it was Maggie Thatcher, and people expected me to be able to talk about and even defend US policies around that time. I was not a political science major. I wasn't a particularly political person, but to be able to engage in those conversations and to listen and learn and understand, that was a really critical part of my time in the mid-80s in Cambridge. So hard to see that exactly in the application process, but it somehow is, its essence is very much Marshall Scholarship. And all of my peers who have grown up, whether they're in business or in science or in the arts, they do continue to sort of have that sense of connectedness and kind of respect for this part of the scholarship program.
Thanks, Sandra. Now, Andrew, I'm going to stop with the slide pack here because the rest of the slides are a lot about process. And I think Andrew sent the link to everybody who's on the Zoom meeting at this stage. What I want to do from here is actually go to our scholars. And one of the beautiful part about the scholars we've got with us, we have a 1-year scholar, a 2-year scholar, and a 3-year scholar here as evidence that we do fund all 3 routes. And I'd like to start, I think, Andrew, you've got Audrey kicking off, the fabulous Adriana Jenkins, who we met this year and awarded this year, and I can't wait to see what she does. So Audrey, I'm going to turn over to you now, please.
Okay, this is just crazy.
Hi everyone, I'm Audrey. I am currently a senior at Penn State University, finishing out my last year. And as Diane said, I'm a 1-year Marshall Scholar. Well, I will be a 1-year Marshall Scholar at the University of Cambridge in the fall. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about the application process, putting together my application and what I'm looking forward to in the UK. So for me, I started my application process in the spring, and I met with some of the people in the fellowship office on my campus, and we did an interview, and they selected me for university endorsement because you have to be endorsed by your university in order to apply. And so after I was selected for university endorsement, we worked together really closely, and I did a lot of reflecting about who I am as a person, what is important to me, what I value, and how that connects to my identity as a scientist and what I would like to see in the world, and what I value as a leader, right? And so we put together these essays and application materials. Sorry, there's something in the background. This is virtual. The virtual world is a little different. But yes, we worked together very closely, and we put together all these applications, and I thought about what I value. And then I submitted that, and I got an interview. So as a scientist, it's very important that you understand the science field and the healthcare field in multiple aspects, because you are essentially a leader in your field. You have people's health in your hands. And so that's something that I valued, especially for marginalized communities. And I put that into my essays. So we bounced back and forth on the essays. And by the end of the process, I felt like I really had a better understanding of myself and what I value, even though beforehand I thought that I had already known. I think the process really makes you reflect on who you are as a person, and really put your ideas together into a package, a concise package for what you would like to do in the future. And so now that I've been selected for a Marshall Scholarship, I've met some of the other Marshalls, and it's like all these other ideas are flowing into my mind for what I could do in the UK, right? So first I'm like, okay, I'm going to go to the UK, and I'm a scientist, and so I'm going to explore the cultural underlying of different healthcare practices, different research practices in the UK, and how they differ to those that are in the US, in addition to the science that I'll be doing. But now I'm talking to the other marshals, and there are people who are involved in climate and people in military relations and activism and advocacy. And it really opens you to a whole nother realm of study where you start to think about how these things are also important in your field. And so I'm looking forward to exploring that connection more when I'm in the UK, as well as learning more about the historical importance and underlying of different policy in healthcare in the UK.
Thank you very much, Audrey. It's really great to hear your diversity experience. And I must admit, you saved the question from me, but what you're most looking forward to happening in the UK, because it sounds like a really amazing experience going forward.
I was going to say, Andrew, can I just ask Adriana one question? I just chatted it to her. I was wondering if she could just speak really quickly about why she decided the one-year path, being a one-year scholar. A lot of schools are trying to figure out, how do I figure out who a good one-year candidate is? Why did you decide the one-year path? And what does your trajectory post-Marshall hopefully look like?
Okay. Well, I selected the one-year path because the field that I'm actually going into, or what I chose to study in the UK for my degree, I'm going to do an MPhil in biological sciences pathology, and it's actually in cancer immunology, and I've never studied that before, so I'm very excited about it. But also the career path that I'm looking toward is a very long one. So after the Marshall, I would like to pursue an MD PhD, and that's already like an 8-year career path, right? And so I think that the Marshall would be additive to that career path, the things that I would learn when I'm in the UK. But I don't necessarily think that I need to be there for an entire 2 years, especially because the university that I selected as well, I selected Cambridge University, and they already have connections with the NIH. So there is a strong US-UK connection there. And so I decided to go for the one-year Marshall as opposed to the 2. Because I think there'd be a long-standing connection and relationship already.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Audrey. And thanks for the question, Diane. I think it's really good to try and tease that out, because when we have 1 year, 2 year, 3 year scholars. So I'll now pass over to Benjamin Van Doren. Diane has given a bit of an introduction in terms of this. Benjamin, of course, Marshall Scholar. I most know him for being a long-suffering member of our reading committee, reading all the thousands of applications that get flown in, and he puts together. So Benjamin, if you could talk a bit about how you put together your application, how you put together your application, what you were looking for as a reading committee member, and what you enjoyed most whilst you were in the UK.
Hey, thanks, Andrew. And I'm just experienced a bit of a connection jumbling as well, but I think I got the gist of what you were saying, and hopefully I'm coming through clearly right now. So yes, I was an undergraduate at Cornell University, started my Marshall Scholarship in 2016. And I did a DPhil at Oxford where I was for 3.5 years until just this past April, when I returned to the US. And I do identify as an introvert. So I'll put that out there. When I was applying in 2015, I began working with my university fellowship advisor in, I think, June. I worked on my application for the next several weeks. I think through July, submitted it in August to my university endorsement committee, had an interview with them before I was officially selected, and continued on the process in the fall. I'd say from the later stage, certainly a mock interview I did with my committee was probably one of the most, or actually 2 or 3, I believe, one of the most helpful experiences for me in being able to really crystallize my ideas about myself, my future, and be able to present them to the committee when I had my interview. I also relate to Audrey's comments on the process allowing me to really reflect on my life and my goals. I appreciated that. And in my application, I tried to convey really myself truthfully, what drove my passion and curiosity and desire to connect internationally, which turns out to be birds. And I think this theme really ran through my entire application. For example, my ambassadorial potential essay talked about migratory birds as ambassadors. And so maybe that's one of the different ways of looking at ambassadorship that some of the others have talked about. Yeah, when I tried talking about, when I expressed my connection to the UK, one thing I touched upon was an experience I had with visiting scientists from the UK during a volunteer experience in Delaware that I learned from and appreciated and felt connected to. So I was able to draw on that. And then for my envisioned time in the UK, I talked about the different perspectives and ideas and focuses that the scientists at Oxford had in my field, and how I was looking forward to that new experience and what I might be able to draw from that. Andrew, would it be most helpful to talk about my perspectives as a reader or what I enjoyed most in the UK, given the time we have?
As a reader, I think we'd be very interested to hear your reader perspective.
Great. So like Sandra, even though it was a few years ago, I don't really know how I made the cut, given my new perspective as a reader, seeing just the amazing spread of applicants. But I think some distinguishing features that allowed people to stand out amongst that crowd of incredibly impressive people was one thing, having a really compelling reason to be in the UK, having it fit with your long-term goals, having a good program, course of study in mind, and a plan or a convincing plan or opportunity to really engage with the country and maybe Europe more broadly. Having those signs of passion and drive running through the application, maybe connecting threads across different components of the application, conveying this really motivation to make a difference outside of maybe the existing structure and framework the candidate has been presented with, striving to do more and solve problems, that sort of thing, to overcome challenges they've been presented with. So all of these themes were allowed some people to stand out even in a really crowded field of impressive candidates.
Thanks very much, Benjamin. Very interesting to hear from your views. So we will pass back to Sandra, who gets to dual role as a leader of the reading committee and as a Marshall Scholar. Sandra, you've talked a bit about what you're interested in terms of the applications, but can you talk a little bit about your application and what you look for in terms of an application?
Well, Benjamin, your comments were just terrific. And I think what I would add to that is an authentic voice, which is hard to get into written applications. And I'm sure all of you have seen many versions of this, but particularly as students are coached and refined by your offices and by some of their mentors or recommenders, sort of not losing the thread of the authentic voice of the person that's in there. I think we do also really look for, we are, as we're reading across the group, looking for people who are coming from unusual institutions and or programs. It's an important thing that we're sort of looking at to try and balance the awards by field, by type of background, et cetera. So, connecting that to the journey or the narrative that someone is on, why they're at that undergraduate institution, where they're going in the future, that sort of, to me, was important as well. And I think at the end of the day, remembering that this is an academic scholarship, this is not a prize. This is really to go and stretch your brain and your mind and to develop in an academic setting, in some of the very rigorous academic settings, that has to sort of feel like it's authentic in the application as well. So It is a big process. I remember writing mine and rewriting for the entire summer. I was doing research for the entire summer, and I just would go at night to the stacks of the library and sit and write. It was one of the most introspective periods of my life, and it's something that getting the students started on sooner rather than later will be really important. So Andrew, do we want to open this up to Q&A?
Sorry, slow on all the buttons. Absolutely. So in terms of if people want to post questions into the chat, they're most welcome to. If someone wants to just raise a hand to ask a question directly, more than happy to go that either way. Any questions in terms of things, or I'll just start lobbing questions at everyone in terms of what's going on in terms of the processes.
Well, I was going to say, Andrew, while people are thinking of questions, I would actually like Benjamin just to talk a little bit about his experiences in the UK, because he was one of those scientists who was a phenomenal ambassador. And just could you do just like a minute, Benjamin, on some of the stuff you were doing in the UK? Because this came through in your application, it came through in your interview. He wowed us. I mean, he wowed us. So, and then he actually did it. So we love Benjamin.
Thank you. Let's see. So I worked with, one thing I did in the UK was work with migratory bird species that occurs in people's backyards. And so I was running around. One component of my research involved going to people's houses, British people's houses, and working with the birds in their backyards, which gave me the privilege of connecting to people across the country, which I really appreciated, and have stayed connected to many of them now, as well as been in collaborations across Europe in terms of scientists in Germany, in Spain, in Scotland, which seemed far away from Oxford. Yeah, is that about sum up what you like?
Thank you, Benjamin. Yeah, no, I mean, we just love the concept of this scientist who was going to be knocking on people's doors going, could I sit in your backyard and watch the birds? And he actually did it. And, you know, in his reports was just so eloquently written about the people he met and the kindness they had shown him and the research he was doing, and just got a really good feel of what the UK is like, not just what the bird science is like. So Benjamin, I'm going to call on you again because someone's put a question through about the role of the endorsement letter in the assessment process. And I know you had some thoughts on that this year, please.
Sure, by the fellowship. Yeah, okay, I think I understand. Yeah, so when I was reading applications, I noticed there was variation in how different fellowship advisors or endorsers use that space. And so some university fellowship advisors really nicely synthesized the recommendation letters that the recommenders had submitted and neatly tied up the applicant and emphasized points that they felt were salient and important. And I thought that was a really useful use of that space and kind of functioned as an extra boost for the candidate. Of course, candidates that didn't have that, I didn't hold that against them or anything, but I think that's an opportunity to really highlight as an endorser the strengths of the candidate.
Could I pose to Rebecca? I'm sorry to pull you up on this, Rebecca. So when you posed this question, are you talking about that endorsement letter, or were you interested in the other endorsement letters? How are you? What's the question in terms of interest?
Sure, yes. And thank you for this, by the way. It's a really excellent session. I was more interested in the nomination letter from the university, actually not the recommendation letters, but the nomination letter. But it's interesting, Benjamin, that you talk about actually synthesizing the recommendation letters, because I've always heard that that's actually not what folks want in an endorsement letter. So I'd be interested to hear a little bit more about why you're saying that, actually.
Well, I defer to the people in charge here, but certainly as a reader, candidates that had, it was just another opportunity from my view for a case to be made about the candidate. But I'll defer to Diane and Sandra for specific advice on that.
I don't think there's a formulaic answer. I mean, Diane, of course, is the huge expert on this, but that is one flavor that I found very helpful. I agree with you, Benjamin, in terms of not just repeating things. I think that's an important distinction, but the synthesis at almost like a higher level of the so what around this candidate can be really helpful. I'll give you an example of something that I didn't find helpful in the recommender letters. I didn't find helpful kind of tons of backstory on the trials and tribulations of a particular person as they grew up and went to school. I didn't kind of need that much color about overcoming adversity and things like that. It's fine if it's mentioned somewhere, but to write a whole essay about it, I found not helpful. I also noticed a big distinction between universities that were clearly nominating a whole bunch of people, and they had to, I don't want to say that there was a form letter, but there, you start to notice these things, and versus institutions that are earlier in the process and sort of maybe nominating some of their first candidates for the scholarship. And so it mattered to me kind of to think about the recommenders, both the actual institutional endorsement and the individual references, to sort of think about where they were coming from and whether they had had a ton of experience doing this before. So again, I was looking for genuineness and anything that was kind of value added in terms of understanding this person specifically. But Diane, what would you add?
Well, I actually like, Sandra, that you mentioned repeating things from the recommendation letters isn't helpful. Synthesizing is helpful. And it's kind of talking about, out of all of the candidates you met on your campus in that year, why is this the one you put forward for a Marshall Scholarship? And, can you give us some background on why the recommenders have said what they've said and why that's important and how it differed from the other students you were looking at? So to me, the endorsement letter really is that you're the gatekeeper for us. You're the people who are saying, I've talked to hundreds of students every year. These are the ones I put forward for the Marshall Scholarship. These are why they're the strongest ones. Here's why I think they'll be exceptional at what they do. And I'm backed up by the fact that these recommenders are telling us this as well. There's evidence here for it. So, I don't think there's any real magic formula to the endorsement letter. It really is, if you can make it as descriptive as possible, as personal as possible, that's always helpful. And, as you've seen from 3 of us here today, different readers look for different things. So again, there's no one letter you're going to write that's going to wow everybody on a committee. People will take different things away from your letter. So where Sandra talks about making it, as honest and as genuine as possible, that's really helpful. For the people who kind of send in 2 or 3 lines, you're doing a disservice to your candidates. There are schools out there who are writing, really touching, informative letters about their students, and that's helpful to us. So if you're only sending us, small snippets, it's apples to oranges. We don't hold it against your student for that, but there's definitely some information you're leaving off the table.
You want to put a maximum on how much they should write, Diane, because you might just send off people to write copious pages in defense of candidates.
Don't write copious pages. Don't write copious pages, because I think there's a word limit on them anyway. I could be wrong, but I don't think you can write more than a couple of pages.
I just wanted to know 100% sure, and how if there was some word limit in terms, wasn't a word limit. Want to make sure in terms of this. Good. Yeah. Thanks, Kurt, for jumping in there.
I was going to say, Kurt from NYU is saying it's 1,000 words. So I think there's a word limit, but there's a fine balance between like 2 sentences and the 1,000 words. So
question from Christine, probably firstly at Diane and then directed at others. I think that we all would love to be with Benjamin out looking in people's backyards at birds, considering the COVID year we've just gone through, that's for certain. But is looking at other different examples of ambassadorship in terms of how to go about pushing it forward.
This really is, I love Benjamin's example because it's so personal to him, and he had thought through the work he wanted to do in the UK and the research he wanted to do in the UK. So this is what we need your candidates to do. If they're really serious about going to the UK, they need to tell us why and how they're going to engage with the UK. So for me to give examples, it's, I could give you 1,000 examples, but they might not be suitable for your students. We've had students who, again, another engineering candidate who basically was able to talk us through a funding mechanism that's unique to the research he wants to do in the UK, and it applies to a consortium of universities. And so his entire application was about ambassadorship in this respect, because his academic program, he split his time across 2 different universities within the consortium so he could experience both things. He planned on doing some work with the government body that was funding the application so he could understand the government side of it. He was then planning on spending time with the user groups of the invention that he was working on. So he was getting to know the British population and how they were using the science. So, you know, it just was all encompassing. It's one of those things where if your students really, really, really want to go to the UK, they'll find those organizations, they'll find those activities, you know, and Google is their friend, right? You know, Google what's going on in the UK, use the BBC, use the Times, use, you know, any sort of extracurricular groups at your school, use any sort of resources in the local area. You know, they really need to be thinking about how am I embedding, how am I getting to know the area that I'm in. So I don't know if any of the Marshall Scholars on the call want to add to that.
I'll just volunteer that one of the things I was very passionate about back in the day was nuclear arms and the safe use of the nuclear technology that, you know, the world had invented. And I went to a conference the summer right before graduating, right before senior year, for student pugwash in the US. And then I got excited about pugwash and I realized there was no student pugwash UK. And so I started Student Pugwash UK kind of even before applying. I got started on starting it before applying for the Marshall Scholarship. That turned into a piece of work that took me to the real Pugwash conference in Budapest in 1986. So, you know, there are lots of ways this kind of plays out, but I think one trick might be, I'm going off script here, but ask yourself why the student would be a better Marshall Scholar than a Rhodes Scholar. That kind of will help you think a lot about ambassadorship. The academics and the leadership, I think, is probably very similar. But when you force yourself to say, well, why should this student be an American representative at a British university under a Marshall Scholarship banner? Like, what about them is going to really stand out? Why do I want to bet that they're going to make a difference? In terms of the connection to the UK going forward in their field, or their ability to appreciate the cultural difference and be a bridge or whatever. That is the essence of something. If that can jump out to you or to the student, that's really, really helpful.
So the next question comes in from Kurt, and strangely enough, I might even have the first go at this one. How is Marshall preparing its panels to engage a diverse range of applicants and to minimize bias within the selection process? Okay, there's a couple of things in terms of what it does happen, and then I can say what happens from a New York perspective, and I would encourage Paolo if he wants to come in and talk from Boston perspective as well, because I think there is selection bias training which takes place, I think it's now every year, from all the members of the committee, which we have to do. So we end up annoying all our committee members an awful lot in terms of doing this. And it's an active thing, part of the discussion in terms, I think, of a lot of our nominations. One of the things which is, I mean, this is something which we think about an awful lot in the New York region. And one of the most key parts about this is ensuring that we have a very diverse panel. Amusingly, as we say this and we see three members of the panel who are here are all white, I can assure you, if we look for a broader sphere, we have a very, our selection, especially our interview committee, I think is pretty much roughly meets the diversity of the United States in terms of, maybe not quite age, but definitely gender, racial diversity in terms of what we're doing. And amusingly, I'm just spending a significant period of my time trying to recruit someone to ensure that we maintain that diversity in terms of what we do. And I think it's something which is, it's very clean in terms of what we do, and we're very keen to do this. More than we spent a lot of time thinking about this. We spent a lot of time trying to ensure this, and getting a diverse range of schools, I think, is so key in terms of what we're doing this. And this is what we're doing through this. And to be honest, other discussions, which we'll be having later, and other ideas, but we'll get to that in the near future. Boston region, would you like to come, Rachel or Paolo, would you like to come in and talk a bit about from your perspective in terms of this?
Nothing more to add. It's just been such an illuminating and vibrant conversation. I think just the points of being authentic and genuine in the application is critical. There don't need to be sort of specific bells or whistles that really spark it. Even just from my experiences sitting on the reading committees, it astounds me how there's no set formula to what strikes one application to be raised above the rest in terms of consideration. So, just continue to encourage your applicants to find their authentic voice in this. And it's really such, the application itself and going through it is such a tremendous exercise, even for those applicants who don't make it through to the interview phase of the process. It really is a great practice to kind of craft out what one would want to do with graduate work, why studying abroad is so critical, what they'd want to bring back to it. So it's just, I think, such an invaluable exercise, even for those that don't make it to the final round and eventually earn a scholarship. It cannot be replaced just in terms of the clarity that one gets. I'm just thinking of some students I've spoken to in the region that, you know, maybe just missed the cutoff to getting an interview, but I really wanted to reach out to those fellowship advisors and those students to encourage it. And I know there was one case where it completely allowed that student to have a clearer picture of what their eventual PhD application would be to the other institution that they applied for and went to. So, you know, again, I just think it's great to encourage students to go down this road and to look at the Marshall, if nothing else, because it will provide them with a task of drawing up a roadmap, even if they don't follow it exactly to the T, as I think has been expressed here, but it's still a great practice to develop what your future career is going to be post your undergraduate and into your graduate work and professional life.
Wonderful. Thank you very much, Paula.
Andrew, could I? I'm sorry, Andrew. Could I just?
I was going to end on the hour,
too?
so go to Diane, and then if anyone wants any final comments, we'll go from that. Yeah.
Yeah, because I was going to say just for the question around preparing the committees and what work are we doing. You know, we take the unconscious bias training. Every committee member takes that. A lot of what I learned about sharing in New York, I learned from the Boston region and the fantastic people that I worked with there. You know, we're very careful and we're very thoughtful about the people who we select to read. We're very thoughtful about who we pair them with to discuss and who they work with. So that way there are always differences in who's reading materials, but there's always some sort of consensus around how ideas are being exchanged and how challenges being made. We're looking for people who are constructive challengers. And you see that throughout our process. Hopefully Sandra saw that this year as we went from reading into interview and selecting people. You know, my committee members are not afraid to say to anybody, you know what, I think you're being unfair to that candidate because, and whether it's because they're an introvert and you're an extrovert, or because they went to this school or that school, or because they're this field and you're not, or, you know, as a group, we tend to lean this way and treat these types of fields unfairly. You know, we actually do have those conversations, and we welcome those conversations actually. So I think as well, creating the environment within the committees where people aren't afraid to speak their mind and aren't afraid to challenge other people, because we know it's not personal, it's about getting the best outcome from the applicants we have.
Here. Yeah, that's very interesting. Thank you very much for everyone. Does anyone want any final comments? Or shall I just wrap this up now? I don't see any hands. Awesome. Thank you very much, everyone, for taking part. Thank you to our wonderful Marshall scholars who have stepped in to do this, and to Diane and Sandra. I will send around a copy of this slide deck, which when we went through the slides off, I'll send a link to this video, and we'll talk to you about future events we have soon. But thank you very much, everyone, for attending. It's been wonderful.